Today, I'm going to talk about my experience with hypermobility spectrum disorder. Hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And if you're new here, I'm Dr. Alyssa Olenek. A lot of people know me as Doc Liss. And something a lot of people are really surprised to hear and know is that I struggle with something known as hypermobility spectrum disorder, or just hypermobility. I have had struggles with this my entire life, and it does impact a lot of my exercise, day-to-day training, and a lot of snags, niggles, injuries that I've had or issues I have. And it's something that I've really personally worked to overcome, to not have be my identity or totally be an obstacle that stops me from doing the things I want to do. But it is something that I'm constantly having to manage. And so when I tell people that I have it, I think they're shocked. Can I help you, miss? My dog has an attitude disorder. So when people find out that I'm as active as I am and that I've struggled with this my entire life, it seems really confusing because most people with hypermobility spectrum disorder, or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a related syndrome and disorder, tend to have a lot of issues with exercise and exercise tolerance and or pain associated with training and exercise. So I want to start this by saying that my experience may not be yours, and everyone's experience with this is different. And that doesn't mean that you should feel bad if you can't do what I'm doing, but also keeping in mind that I do a lot to work around and with myself with this. And it is a lot more of an obstacle than I think I often talk about or even allude to, because I've worked so hard to move past this and around it. So now that I'm done with my disclaimers, what is hypermobility spectrum disorder, and or what even is this? So essentially, my connective tissue in my body is overly stretchy. And this might seem awesome because I'm super flexible and I'm hypermobile and my joints move and I don't have to worry about deep squatting or all of these issues that people tend to struggle with. I don't really need to stretch. I was born stretched, more or less. But it is a syndrome and disorder, which means it affects things across your entire body, which means that I'm especially prone to things like soft tissue injuries. And if you've been here for a while, you know that I struggled with Achilles tendonitis, plantar fasciitis, glute tendinopathy, a lot of those connective soft tissues that get really chirpy and or have struggles with that, as well as feet problems, feet stability, instability, ankle, and or that type of pain associated with my running, my back and hip shifting and giving out when it comes to my lifting, and or chronic shoulder pain and nerve pain associated because of that, with things like that across my whole life. You might not know that by just looking at me, but a lot of those things are symptoms or related to this diagnosis and or disorder. It is a spectrum. So everyone's diagnosis is different and everyone's experience within that is different. There's some comorbidities that come along with it, where some people have issues with their gut and or GI connective tissue can affect gut health things. And if you've paid any attention to me from Instagram or some of my podcast and stuff through my PhD, I went through a large stint of gut health issues, which was likely exacerbated or related to some of the stuff that I struggle with hypermobility, neurodivergence, cardiac tissue issues, and or cardiac heart issues, which can be a main issue in a comorbidity, which I luckily do not deal with, as well as things like POTS, which I don't have, but I have friends who have hypermobility spectrum disorder that have, and everything in between. So for me, my main issues come from musculoskeletal, nerve pain, GI issues, or potentially some neurodivergent things that may or may not be diagnosed. And I'm lucky that I don't have any other extreme issues associated with, at least that I'm aware of. So for me, so much of my management of this has come from getting stronger and learning how to work within my own tolerance. So let's back up a little bit. When I was growing up, essentially the long story short is I was born a NICU baby, emergency C-section, all of these things. And part of that, I also was born with one of my legs twisted in the womb. So when I was younger growing up, I had all these special boots, orthotics, how to do these extra exercises, all of this stuff. And part of that was also brought on by the fact that I was hypermobile and my parents didn't know when I was younger. So luckily they got me in dance and gymnastics from an early age. And I think that really helped me building a lot of baseline strength, especially in my feet and those tiny little muscles and things where I really struggle at an early age, which was probably the best thing they ever did for me. Then I got involved in cheerleading and gymnastics, which again helped with a lot of that strength that I needed, but also was where I started to learn I had things like lower back pain and shoulder pain, or my shoulders would sublocate or disassociate. And I used to jump rope with my arms as a girl in elementary school, and they called me freaky arm girl and things like that. So there were signs and symptoms across my life, but it wasn't until I started cheerleading and then lacrosse in high school where I started to actually have pain and issues associated with this. I always felt really fortunate because when I was younger and dealing with all of my stuff, the doctors told my parents I would never walk normal, let alone run. And I was doing those things and I didn't think anything of it until I started to get a lot of pain in later high school. So my parents started taking me to doctors. And I went to a sports nutrition doctor who essentially took me, bent me a bunch of ways, said I had never met any client or any patient that has been as hypermobile as you, and diagnosed me with hypermobility spectrum disorder right there on the spot. He essentially wrote me a script for a back brace, told me to stop playing sports, and that my back couldn't support itself, and I was doomed and gloomed, and my shoulder just didn't have the stability that it needed for me to play lacrosse. Luckily, I'm really, really stubborn, and this is not the first time that I have had physical therapists, sports doctors, and or similar tell me that my body wasn't made for running or sports or couldn't support itself or do the things that I wanted to do. But the reality was getting strong was the thing that my body needed. Someone shouldn't be suffering with chronic back pain as a teenager and or chronic shoulder pain in their early 20s as a teenager, and I was. But the thing that helped me alleviate so much of that was getting strong. And so luckily I started lifting at a young age for sport, but I started taking it more seriously when I was playing college lacrosse and then even following that. And that was the thing that started to significantly reduce a lot of the pain that I was experiencing growing up or even in college. Now, I still felt all the time like I had a lot of inflammation and pain and discomfort in my joints and tissues. And I also felt like I also dealt with a lot of small tissue injuries all the time. Now, youth helped me a lot when I was younger, but that started to sneak up a little bit me as I continued as I got older. And one of the things that really, really helped me with that discomfort and the pain and the tolerance was, one, learning how to actually exercise in a way that managed volume and intensity in recovery. So following a good program, such as the LIST method, which is part of the reason why I invented that. But two was my nutrition. Having a higher quality diet, I don't want to throw away around the word like anti-inflammatory, but not a highly processed, super like saturated fat heavy, super, quote unquote, unhealthy food diet always made me feel really crummy. But having a more whole foods diet, protein forward, plants, fiber, less processed foods makes me feel a lot better. So the combination of good training with that, as well as making sure I'm prioritizing sleep, amongst other things in my health, means my body always feels better, feels safer, and it aches and pains less, as well as having a good training program that has helped make me stronger. One of the things I don't think a lot of people realize is that my persistency with strength training, even as I've explored my running journey, is because it is the only thing holding me together and keeping me pain and injury free. I am so adamant about getting at least the minimum of what I need every single weekend with my resistance training, because that is the thing that stops my Achilles, my feet, my hip, my whatever it is that hurts from hurting and keeps my body strong. So for me, strength training isn't something that held me back. It was a thing that truly gave me the ability to do the things that I want and I love. Training is not just strength, it also can be rehab, and rehab can also be strength training and so on and so forth. I could not do the things that I'm doing though without working with a physical therapist. I know from watching this video, you're gonna wanna say, hey Liz, can you help diagnose me? Can you tell me what to do? Can you tell me X, Y, and Z? And while I can provide you with a fantastic program inside the LIST method that will help you adjust for volume, intensity, or work around it, we have hypermobile clients who come and say that this was the first program that helped them actually adapt to that efficiently, or clients who also struggle with other exercise intolerances, because it's an actually realistic and appropriate volume program. We can help you with that, and I'm happy to help you with that as well. But I really encourage you to work with a really good physical therapist and don't take no for an answer. I am so lucky to do the things that I do, but the physical therapist that met me and worked with me and said, I don't need you to stop doing the activities you love, but I need to help get you back to them or find a way to adjust for them, were the thing that allowed me to move forward, especially when I start to explore higher volumes or higher distances of endurance running. I have powerlifted to the extreme and I've ran to the extreme, and I will say that the thing that is harder for me to keep up with without injury is the running, because of the volume and the pounding and or the tissue tolerance needed for that. And strength training is the thing that allows me to do that. I was told in my PhD when I went to a physical therapist to stop running. My body wasn't made for it. I shouldn't be doing ultra marathons. And last year I ran 100 miles. Now, I still have struggles and pains and issues all of the time, but it is so much less because of the things that I do to take care of my body. But I also am really, really intentional about managing, like I said, my volume and my intensity. And I'm really careful about big swings or big shifts or big jumps in intensity or volume in my training. So a great example of this is if I come back from a trip or a week or two off training because I'm out exploring or hiking or doing whatever it is that I do, when I jump back into the gym the next week, I will ease in for 1 or 2 weeks before I get back to normal training, because I don't want to jump back right to what I was doing. I will give my body the space and time to adjust back. Similarly with running, I take longer, slower buildups often for my running and racing training, which I think is typically good advice for a lot of people. You gain more fitness by doing that, but allows me more time to let my tissues and body adapt to the same long run volume or the same running distance before it moves on to the next thing. Or if I feel any sort of flare-ups, I know immediately to adjust back to the volume or intensity or effort of what I was doing to where it wasn't bothering me before. That means I'm very repetitive, I'm very consistent, I'm very deliberate in what I'm doing with my training. And sometimes it can seem a little neurotic to some people, but it is the thing that allows me to do what I want to do without breaking down or hurting or my body not tolerating it in the process. So I probably restrain myself more often at 80 to 90% of what my actual max capacity is at any given point in time to not tip over my cup of tolerance or bucket in what I'm doing so I can keep doing more. I will always do 10 to 20% less so I can keep doing it long-term and consistently without injury than risking that tipping over point that goes too far. We saw this. I documented a little bit of my return from injury coming out of my PhD in the process of how I managed that recovery and coming back to running. And that was a really long and hard process for me. I had an Achilles issue, then followed by a glute issue with both of those tendons and connective tissue that took a really long time for me to recover from. They also didn't tolerate intensity for a really long time. And it was strength training that allowed me to recover from that and maintain those injuries long term. But it was something where I just had to work with my body and live with it and let it adapt as it needed to, because my connective tissue just doesn't work like everybody else's, and that's okay. So I did less to be able to do more going forward, and I'm very, very careful now about not pushing past that point, because the onset of that injury with my Achilles was the perfect storm of doing double unders at a CrossFit class, speed workouts for my running that I was doing, and then quite literally wearing heels to a conference, which sounds so silly, but my body is sensitive. So I even make choices now like footwear or things that I do or little things like that to help support my body. So it's not over tipping the stress bucket of tolerance, so I can go do the things that I care about on trail or road or in the gym. It's a lot of considerations, and it helps me keep my pain at bay, but that doesn't mean it's not there. I struggle with a lot of things. I get chronic nerve pain and or blood vessel occlusion down this arm a lot that will cause me a lot of pain and discomfort that I then have to treat. It's kind of mimics thoracic outlet syndrome type symptomology that causes me a lot of pain, especially with computer or phone time, which if you're watching this, you know that my job is big screen, medium screen. That is my whole job. And it's so silly to think that even being on my phone and answering questions or posting your DMs can cause me pain some days, but it does. Same thing with aches and pains in my feet and ankles or shins or hips or whatever that is with lifting and running. Sometimes I just have to adjust and adapt or pull back or let myself recover so I don't tip that over a little bit too much. But honestly, I have mostly been pain-free other than my little injuries and being careful about that stuff for the majority of the last few years, simply because I really respect my body. I balance intensity and volume. I balance, high, hard impact stuff with lower impact stuff. And I'm really careful and considerate about the way that I train. Honestly, a lot of these principles of what I've learned working with my body, I've applied to the LIST method because a lot of people are dealing with a lot of stressors that go into their bucket of training in life, and it allows you to actually train in a way that's sustainable and adaptable. That also allows a lot of variety of people to come into my community. I've worked really hard to not view myself as my diagnosis and or make it my identity, because for me, I want to be an athlete. I want to be strong. I want to be capable. I want to be powerful. And I was told no by doctor after doctor after doctor growing up, but no wasn't enough for me. I wanted to say yes to what I wanted to do, but I really did have to be, and I still have to be very patient and kind and considerate and forgiving of my body, and knowing that I can maybe never give the 100% that I could without wonky connective tissue. But it means that I can give 100% of what this version of me and my body is. And I think that's the most important lesson for those of you who are dealing with any other clinical condition and or chronic pain condition or whatever it is and what bucket you fall into. Again, the point of this video isn't for you to say, well, now I feel bad because I struggle with X, Y, Z condition, and so does Liz, and Liz is doing insane, crazy things. The thing to remember is that I have been an athlete my entire life. My volume and my tolerance and my reps and experience of my body of doing higher volume things is something that I've adapted to for 15 to 20 years. That's something that my body is used to, it's been exposed to. So for me, that isn't as extreme as that might be for you to throw yourself into. And you might just have to take your time gradually working up to things like I have in my running over the last 6 to 8 to 10 years since I've ramped it back up more than I did growing up. The biggest question I get when it's related to this as well is, do I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? And I've had a sports medicine doctor bring that up to me once. We had a conversation, and you can get genetic testing to see if you have that. But for me, because I don't have any of the heart issues and conditions that are the biggest risk factor for that, and there's no really cure other than knowing that you have it, it just wouldn't be information I think is beneficial beyond what I know works and helps with my body. But that doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile for you to pursue if you think you have that. And if you want to pursue a diagnosis in this, I encourage you to have a conversation with your doctor, talk to a sports nutrition doctor, a physical therapist. Typically, there's some tests they can do in certain joints to see if so many of them are hypermobile, you likely fall in the spectrum, and or the other symptomology that comes along with it. Again, I can't diagnose you on this. I'm just sharing my experience and story here and how I manage these things, because I know a lot of people, when they find out I have that, they're one shocked, they're curious, or they also struggle with these things too and want to know how I manage to do what I do on top of it. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you learned something. I hope that helps clear up the questions that I get asked about this. And I hope you recognize that sometimes people that you look up to or think are doing incredible things and amazing things are also struggling a lot behind the scenes, or not everything is as easy breezy or perfect as it seems. I just have chosen to not be super vocal about it and just work with it and work with my body and accept that that is what it is, while also not letting it define me or stop me in the process. So if you found that helpful, you have questions or anything below that aren't medical advice, let me know below. I'm happy to help or answer anything from that. But otherwise, again, nothing in this video is medical advice. I really encourage you though to advocate for your own health. Talk to doctor, provider if you think this is something that you might struggle with as well. And otherwise, thank you for being here, and I hope to see you back on my channel for the next video.